Hello there, friends. I join you today from my back deck, and I will be sharing an article with you today from HBR Selections on Empathy. Here is the book. This article is written by a gentleman named Adam Waits, and in it, Adam discusses the limits of empathy. As always, I will share a little bit about the author and then we'll jump right into the article. It states, Adam Waits is an associate professor of management and organizations at Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management. Wonderful. And this article was written in 2016. So let's hear what Adam has to say about the limits of empathy. A few years ago, Ford Motor Company started asking its mostly male engineers to wear the Empathy Belly, a simulator that allows them to experience symptoms of pregnancy firsthand. The back pain, the bladder pressure, 30 or so pounds of extra weight. They can even feel movements that mimic fetal kicking. The idea is to get them to understand the ergonomic challenges that pregnant women face when driving, such as limited reach, shifts in posture and center of gravity, and general bodily awkwardness. Now, it's unclear whether this has improved Ford's cars or increased customer satisfaction, but the engineers claim benefits from the experience. They're still using the belly. They're also simulating the foggy vision and stiff joints that elderly drivers with an age suit. If nothing more, these exercises are certainly an attempt to get the other person's point of view, which Henry Ford once famously said was the key to success. Empathy is all the rage pretty much everywhere, not just at Ford and not just at engineering, but all product development teams. It's at the heart of design thinking and innovation more broadly. It's also touted as a critical leadership skill, one that helps you influence others in your organization, anticipate stakeholders' concerns, respond to social media followers, and even run better meetings. But a recent research by me and many others suggests that all this heat and light may be a bit too intense. Though empathy is essential in leading and managing others, without it, you will make disastrous decisions and forfeit the benefits just described. Failing to recognize its limits can impair individual and organizational performance. Here are some of the biggest problems you can run into and recommendations for getting around them. So problem number 1, Adam says, it's exhausting. Like heavy-duty cognitive tasks such as keeping multiple pieces of information in mind at once or avoiding distractions in a busy environment, empathy depletes our mental resources. So, jobs that require constant empathy can lead to compassion fatigue. Get fatigued of being compassionate for others. An acute inability to empathize that's driven by stress and burnt out. A more gradual and chronic version of this phenomenon. Health and human services professionals, doctors, nurses, social workers, corrections officers, etc., are especially at risk because empathy is central to their day-to-day jobs. In a study of hospice nurses, for example, the key predictors for compassion fatigue were psychological, anxiety, feelings of trauma, life demands, and what the researchers call excessive empathy, meaning the tendency to sacrifice one's own needs for others rather than simply feeling for people. Variables such as long hours and heavy caseloads also had an impact, but less than expected according to their research. And in a survey of Korean nurses, self-reported compassion fatigue strongly predicted their intentions to leave their jobs in the near future. Other studies of nurses show additional consequences of compassion fatigue, such as absenteeism and increased errors in administering medication. Certainly not something that you want to hear if you are managing a healthcare service provider, healthcare company. Now, people who work for charities and other non-profits, think like animal shelters, let's say, are similarly at risk. Voluntary turnover is exceedingly high, in part because of the empathetically demanding nature of the work. Low pay exacerbates the element of self-sacrifice. What's more, society's strict views of how non-profits should operate means that they face a backlash when they act like businesses. For instance, investing in overhead to keep the organization running smoothly. Everyone will hear this, that they're giving themselves raises, and there will be a huge outpouring, a huge outcry against this. They're expected to thrive through selfless outpourings of compassion from workers. That's how they expect the company to operate. The demand for empathy is relentless in other sectors as well. Day after day, managers must motivate knowledge workers by understanding their experiences and perspectives and helping them find personal meaning in their work. Customer service professionals must continually quell the concerns of distressed callers. Empathy is exhausting, and any setting or role in which it is a primary aspect of the job. So that is problem number one, Adam says. It's exhausting. Problem number two, he states, it is zero sum. The article, he explains, empathy doesn't just drain energy and cognitive resources. It also depletes itself. The more empathy I devote to my spouse, the less I have for my mother. The more I give to my mother, the less I can give my son. Both our desire to be empathic and the effort it requires are in limited supply, whether we're dealing with family or friends or customers and colleagues. It is zero sum, Adam says. Consider this study. Researchers examined the trade-offs associated with empathic behaviors at work and at home by surveying 844 workers from various sectors, including hairstylists, firefighters, and telecom professionals. People who reported workplace behaviors such as taking time to listen to co-workers' problems and worries and helping others who have heavy workloads felt less capable of connecting with their families, according to this research. They felt emotionally drained and burdened by work-related demands. You could actually make the inverse argument as well. If somebody is in a relationship, a family relationship, in which they are expected to have outpourings of empathy constantly, they may, it could be argued, have less empathy, less ability to feel compassion when they go into the workplace. So if it is indeed a zero-sum game, as the author states, it's not just one way, it works in both directions as well. Anyway, continuing the article. Sometimes the zero-sum problem leads to another type of trade-off. Empathy towards insiders, say people on our teams or in our organizations, can limit our capacity to empathize with people outside our immediate circles. We naturally put more time and effort into understanding the needs of our close friends and colleagues. We simply find it easier to do because we care more about them to begin with in the first place. This uneven investment creates a gap that's widened by our limited supply of empathy. So it's all flowing in one direction, towards the insiders, the inside circle. And so there is simply less of it that's going to make its way into the larger and larger spheres. As we use up most of what's available on insiders, our bonds with them get stronger, while our desire to connect with outsiders wanes. Preferential empathy can antagonize those who see us as protecting our own. Think about how people reacted when the Pope praised the Catholic Church's handling of sexual abuse, as an example. It can also, a bit more surprisingly, lead to insiders' aggression towards outsiders. For example, in a study I conducted with University of Chicago Professor Nicholas Epley, we looked at how two sets of participants, those sitting with a friend to prime empathic connection, and those sitting with a stranger, how they would treat a group of terrorists, they say, an outgroup with particularly negative associations. So, in this experiment, after describing the terrorists, we asked how much participants endorsed statements portraying them as subhuman, how acceptable waterboarding them would be, and how much of voltage of electric shock they would be willing to administer to them. Merely, and this is the interesting point, merely sitting in a room with a friend significantly increased people's willingness to torture and dehumanize. Why? According to Adam, it's because there's the inside circle now. We empathize with one another inside, and those outside, we simply have less. Now, this second point about it being zero-sum could arguably be disputed with many different arguments. However, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to continue reading through what Adam says. Although, continuing the article, although this study represents an extreme case, the same principle holds for organizations. Compassion for one's own employees and colleagues sometimes produces aggressive responses towards others outside. More often, insiders are simply uninterested in empathizing with outsiders. But even that can cause people to neglect opportunities for constructive collaboration across functions or organizations. Problem number 3, Adam says, is excessive empathy. It can erode ethics. Finally, empathy can cause lapses in ethical judgment. We saw some of that in the study about terrorists. In many cases, though, the problem stems not from aggression towards outsiders, but rather from extreme loyalty towards insiders. That is the concern that will erode ethics, is compassion and loyalty towards the people that you care about. In making a focused effort to see and feel things the way people who are close to us do, we may take on their interests as our own, and this can make us more willing to overlook the transgressions or even behave badly ourselves. Multiple studies in behavioral science and decision making show that people are more inclined to cheat when it serves another person. In various settings, with the benefits ranging from financial to reputational, people use this ostensible altruism to rationalize their dishonesty. It's okay if I'm dishonest, I'm helping people. I am helping people, so it's okay if I cheat. It's going to be better because of what I'm doing, because of the wrong things that I'm doing. It only gets worse when they empathize with another's plight or feel the pain of someone who is treated unfairly. In those cases, they're even more likely to lie, cheat, or steal to benefit that other person. In the workplace, empathy towards fellow employees can inhibit whistleblowing. And when that happens, it seems scandals often follow. Just ask the police, military, Penn State University, Citigroup, JP Morgan, and WorldCom. Keep in mind, this article was written in 2016. The kinds of problems that have plagued those organizations, brutality, sexual abuse, fraud, tend to be exposed by outsiders who don't identify clearly with the perpetrators inside, because the ethics internally has been eroded by excessive empathy, excessive loyalty, even when undeserved. In my research with Leanne Young and James Dungan of Boston College, we studied the effects of loyalty on people using Amazon's Mechanical Turk, an online marketplace where users earn money for completing tasks. At the beginning of the study, we asked some participants to write an essay about loyalty and others to write about fairness. Later in the study, they were each exposed to poor work by someone else. Those who had received the loyalty nudge in writing that were less willing to blow the whistle on a fellow user for inferior performance. This finding complements research showing that bribery is more common in countries that prioritize collectivism. Interesting to think about that, because now it takes on an entire cultural dynamic, an entire geopolitical dynamic. If there is a civilization or group that values collective thinking, there's more likely to be the type of attitude that will breed bribery, because the most important thing is loyalty to the group, not fairness to the individual, let's say. Another way to interpret this, and I don't know the research that was conducted behind this, but another way to interpret it is that people who were given the fairness nudge by writing that article were more keen to be, I suppose, fair in their thinking in handing out punishments for poor quality workmanship. So it's hard to tell whether it was the fairness nudge or the loyalty nudge that did it. But in any case, there was a difference shown. The sense of group belonging and interdependence among members often leads people to tolerate the offense. It makes them feel less accountable for it, diffusing responsibility to the collective whole instead of assigning it to the individual. In short, empathy for those within one's immediate circle can conflict with justice for all. How to rein in excessive empathy. These three problems may seem intractable, but as a manager, you can do a number of things to mitigate them in your organizations. Tip number 1, split up the work. You might start by asking each employee to zero in on a certain set of stakeholders, rather than empathize with anyone and everyone. Some people can focus primarily on customers, for instance, and others can on coworkers. Think of it as kind of creating task forces to meet different stakeholders' needs. This makes the work of developing relationships and gathering perspectives less consuming for individuals. You will also accomplish more in the aggregate by distributing caring responsibilities across your team or company. Although empathy is finite for any one person, it's less bounded when managed across all the employees. Tip number 2, make it less of a sacrifice. Our mindsets can either intensify or lessen our susceptibility to empathy overload. For example, we exacerbate the zero-sum problem when we assume that our own interests and others are fundamentally opposed. This often happens in deal-making and negotiation, when parties with completely different positions on an issue get stuck because they're obsessed with the gap between them. An adversarial mindset not only prevents us from understanding and responding to the other party, but it also makes us feel as though we have lost when we don't get our way. We can avoid burnout by seeking integrative solutions that serve both sides' interests. Take this example. A salary negotiation between a hiring manager and a promising candidate will become a tug of war contest if they have different numbers in mind and fixate on the money alone. But let's suppose that the candidate actually cares more about job security and the manager is keenly interested in avoiding turnover. Building security in the contract could be a win-win. An empathic act by the manager that wouldn't drain his empathy reserves the way making a concession on salary would, because keeping new hires around is in line with his own desires. There's only so much empathy to go around, but it's possible to achieve economies of sorts By asking questions instead of letting assumptions go unchecked, you can bring such solutions to the surface. Tip number 3, give people breaks. As a management and organizations professor, I cringe when students refer to my department's coursework on leadership, teams, and negotiation as soft skills. That's what Adam says. People call his work soft skills, and he doesn't like it. Understanding and responding to the needs, interests, and desires of other human beings involves some of the hardest work of all. It's not a soft skill. It is, in terms of complexity and how to manage it, it's a very difficult, hard skill. Despite claims that empathy comes naturally, it takes arduous mental effort to get into another person's mind and then to respond with compassion rather than indifference. We all know that people need periodic relief from technical and analytic work and from rote jobs like data entry. The same is true of empathy. Look for ways to give employees breaks. It's not sufficient to encourage self-directed projects that also benefit the company and often result in more work. As Google did with its 20% time policy, encourage individuals to take time to focus on their interests alone. Recent research finds that people who take lots of self-focused breaks subsequently report feeling more empathy for others. That might seem counterintuitive, right? Because isn't that acts of selfishness? Why would they feel more compassionate towards others? That may seem counterintuitive, continue with the article, but when people feel restored, they're better able to perform the demanding tasks of figuring out and responding to what others need. So how do you give people respite from thinking and caring about others? Some companies are purchasing isolation chambers like Orb Technologies, wellness and learning pods, so people can literally put themselves inside a bubble to relax, meditate, or do whatever helps them recharge. McLaren, for example, uses the pods to train F1 supercar drivers to focus. Other companies, such as electrical parts distributor Van Meter, are relying on much simpler interventions, like shutting off employee email accounts when workers go on vacation to allow them to concentrate on themselves without interruption. Despite its limitations, empathy is essential at work. So, managers should make sure employees are investing it wisely. Invest your empathy wisely. When trying to empathize, it's generally better to talk with people about their experience than to imagine how they might be feeling, as Nicholas Epley suggests in his book, Mindwise. A recent study bears this out. Participants were asked how capable they thought blind people were of working and living independently. But before answering the question, some were asked to complete difficult physical tasks while wearing a blindfold. Those who had done the blindness simulation judged blind people to be much less capable. That's because the exercise led them to ask, what would it be like if I were blind? The answer? Very, very difficult, because you can't see. That should be obvious. So what would it be like if I were blind? Rather than, what is it like for a blind person to be blind? Now, just that change in perspective made all the difference. This finding speaks to why Ford's use of the empathy belly that we started off this article with, while well-intentioned, may be misguided. After wearing it, engineers may overestimate or misidentify the difficulties faced by drivers who actually are pregnant. Talking to people, asking them how they feel, what they want, and what they think may seem simplistic, but in many cases, it's more accurate. It's also less taxing to employees and their organizations because it involves collecting real information instead of endlessly speculating. And it is a smarter way to empathize. So, that concludes the article. That is what Adam had to share about the limits of empathy. Hopefully you gained some insights from this article. Thank you.